Good afternoon, all.
Guys.
Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for joining. We'll give it a minute or two for other people to join. We'll kick off pretty shortly.
Thanks, Steve.
I'll have these moments of silence before these webinars start. Everybody sits there awkwardly and decides what they're going to do. Praise the slide deck. Praise that the demonstration equipment works as it should do, etc.
That's what I was going to say. As the other techie on the call, it's always nerve-wracking. It'll be all right on the night, though. I have full confidence.
Be all right at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we hope. Right, it's 1 minute past, so I think we're ready to go. So thank you all for giving us your lunchtime. I hope you find this session informative. Some very quick housekeeping. You will be muted to keep the background noise to a minimum, and there will be a chance at the end for a Q&A, so don't fret about the muting. We will be recording the presentation as well. So let me make some introductions. I'm Steve Hollingsworth. I'm the sales director here at Covenco, and I've been an IBM solution specialist for over 30 years. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Greg Lee, who is the storage technical sales leader at IBM, and my colleague Chris Slater, who is one of our senior storage consultants.
Nice to be here, Steve.
Afternoon, Greg. Afternoon, Chris. That's a polite way to do it, isn't it? I remember how this all works. Let me start by outlining briefly what we'll cover today. Safeguarded copy, too good to be free. We want to show you what you get out of the box and why, with some forethought, it might one day be a business savior. The star of the show will be my colleague Chris. He'll conduct a demo demonstrating how the product can swiftly and effortlessly be integrated into your operations. And then after that, although SGC is very powerful on its own, I'm going to pass over to Greg on how to augment with Predator and Defender and how that can substantially enhance the initial offering. Finally, as promised, there will be a Q&A at the end. We'd like to keep the session interactive where we can, so there will be a poll or two as we go along, and those polls will be anonymous. We'll speak more about those later. Now, I promise we're not going to discuss the threat landscape. We all know the challenges, but I'd just like to highlight a couple of points. AV Test, the independent antivirus reviewers, state that there are 500,000 new pieces of malware detected daily. And further sources estimate that 3.4 billion phishing emails are sent out each day. Now, those are really scary numbers. And unfortunately, as Covenco, our experience is based on real-world data breaches. As a Veeam cloud partner, we have petabytes of data under management, and sadly, we deal with a security breach most months. Some are supported clients, but we also receive calls to help where it might be our first engagement. And what we see is that almost any breach will consist of 3 phases: the infection, then detection and response, and finally recovery. In the recovery phase, to be effective, it's extremely important to maintain a structured approach that follows a very carefully orchestrated plan. Businesses should work in advance to establish those processes and how you manage your own resources, but equally key will be the external support you need. And you can leverage people like Covenco for that additional support, be that instant response, rental equipment, or DR services. Now, there are some similarities to all breaches. Firstly, there's the timing. That's designed to maximize the chance to destroy and encrypt as much data as possible before you, the customer, can react. So in our experience, 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning is a favorite time. Then, unfortunately, the freeze and the panic. Even the best plan have pause for thought. Planning does mean a quicker response, but we often see, unfortunately, some amount of confusion and chaos. Lastly and critically, before the malware is triggered, the threat actor has been in your estate for days, even weeks, and they've made a plan to target your backups. That is crucial to their success in crippling you. If you have no air-gapped option, it could be disastrous. Now, let me give you an example from our own experience. We had a client who had, on several occasions, been provided with options for immutable backups by Covenco. As is often the case, money was not available. The customer was breached, and inevitably the customer had no backups as they were compromised. It took weeks for them to recover, and the data was brought back forensically a few gig at a time. That alone cost £100,000 plus, and the disruption to the business was thousands more. Now that highlights the budget issue, which we see is common to nearly all customers. We know budgets and time and availability dictates what a company can do themselves. In an ideal world, you'd have multiple backups, multiple media, one air-gapped and safeguarded copy can be that air-gapped copy, regularly tested and if possible automated. And we'll come on to that with Predator and Defender when Greg speaks. But the economics often win. And that's where we see safeguarded copy as an excellent way to implement something that could be the save of your business for free. While IBM Storage and safeguarded copy are not the sole components of your overall cyber strategy, they can play a crucial role. Incorporating them can be a strategic move for your business, and as we said already, it is free. If you already have IBM Storage, it's likely you can do this now. We can talk you through the prerequisites and happily speak to you after this session. And if you're one of the companies on the call evaluating a new storage vendor, IBM's cheaper than you might think. It is phenomenally performant for its price, and this free SGC feature is included in almost all systems. Now, I'd like to run a quick poll at this point. As I said earlier on, these polls are anonymous, so you're not sharing any identifiable information. We'll simply gather statistics and present the overall numbers here. So, how many people on the call, please, are already using IBM Storage in their business? Now, given that IBM is our go-to vendor for storage, I won't be surprised if the majority of the attendees have IBM technology in place. But what will be interesting is when we ask later on if they have immutable copy, has it been activated at this point?
Yep.
Interesting. So we do not have any IBM Storage and other more than 50%. Okay. So we can see the poll answers on the screen. So there seems to be a roughly 50-50 split between companies that are running IBM Storage and aren't running IBM Storage at the moment. So for those of you not running IBM Storage, if you are evaluating IBM Storage, we'd be very happy to have that conversation with you. And as I said earlier on, this SGC feature is available in nearly all the range and is, as we say, a free feature. Let's talk about SGC itself. Safeguarded copy, in short, is an immutable policy-controlled snapshot based on IBM's instant point-in-time flash copy function. It provides a crash-consistent copy of your data, taken at predefined and flexible intervals that cannot be deleted, even by super users, until the retention period defined by that policy expires. Flash copy is itself years old, tested for decades and thousands of clients, so it's safe to use. The feature's available on the 5045 range and above, and to put a price point to that, for as little as £10,000 to £15,000, you could be benefiting from this safety feature. If you're one of the companies who voted to say you had older IBM systems, you need to have code level 8.4.2 to implement SGC. Now, there are other considerations about space management, compute cycles needed to run SGC, but the Covenco team are here to consult on that, and it's not onerous and we can engage afterwards. SGC can be set up in a matter of clicks, and Chris will demonstrate that shortly. Yeah. And in the newest IBM Storage, the management of those policies and copies is built into the onboard controllers, so managed through the GUI on the storage. Within minutes, you could be providing that last line of defense. An important distinction here between SGC and other options, though. SGC copies are disk-based on your primary storage, so they're nearly instantly available and where you need them to be, easily connected to existing servers. If you have a compromise, once a decision has been made to roll back to an earlier version, a copy can be brought online in minutes, and Chris will demonstrate that shortly, checked, confirmed as valid, and by that I mean there's no prior corruptions, and the process to clean and promote starts within minutes. When you look at physical tape and even VTL solutions such as Veeam, that can take hours and certainly minutes, only to find the restore potentially has some corruptions and you have to go back further. So this is an interesting question, given that half of the companies that we spoke to earlier perhaps had SGC, to see if they've implemented at this point. I'd like to run a quick poll to see how many of you have an immutable backup in some guise inside your business, be that offline tape or an object lock backup. Again, these polls are anonymous, so do please be honest, and we'll give you a minute or so to look at the answers. Excellent.
Very good responses there.
Yeah, some good responses. Well, as you would hope, excellent. There are some fantastic companies on here, fantastic. So most of the companies already have immutable copy, which is essential. I guess the key here is if we are not using something like SGC and it's not instantly mountable and checkable, then maybe SGC can be part of that estate. We are not saying in any way, shape or form that safeguarded copy is the only answer. In fact, in our own environment, we have immutable copies that are online, but we also have the ultimate offline copy in a tape. We would recommend that to most customers. But that tape's going to take time to recover, and SGC can still be part of the strategy as we move forward. Considerations and planning. Now, we talked about how planning can inform how you set up safeguarded copy. First and foremost, though, your business needs to have that plan, and they need to start by understanding the business needs. We would encourage all businesses to have a frank conversation internally about RPOs, RTOs, and critically the minimum viable business. It is very important that discussion reaches the C-suite and gets their attention. From experience, we had an excellent client with a solid DR plan, and he thought top-down approval. They were hit, and with our help, were back up and running on critical services within 48 hours, which exceeded the SLAs in place. It turns out, though, unfortunately, that the board did not think that was good enough. There was a disconnect between what the C-suite wanted and what the business was delivering. And then there are some central considerations that are the same in all cases. What services represent those minimum viable businesses? How long can you be without them? Where are they? Are they on cloud, on premises? Which servers in your estate? What protects them now, and what order do they need to come back? It's also extremely important to have discussions around the skills needed in a recovery. Are those skills in-house, or are you going to need to have a partner on retainer to help with things like the clean and restoration, or possibly DR equipment? And what does that clean equipment look like? Will you need that DR kit? Are you going to repurpose what you have? And to that final point, it may not be possible if you have to preserve some of the breach systems for forensic analysis and regulatory reporting. Now, Covenco can help with all of that consideration and planning, and we'll happily have conversations afterwards, so there's no need to be daunted. But if that conversation hasn't taken place, and I'd expect and believe it probably has in almost all cases, it's very important that conversation takes place sooner rather than later. And in fact, to that point, I'd like to run a poll at this point. Last poll, I promise, before we go to the demonstration. Again, answers are not going to be identifiable. Who has identified in their business a minimum viable business and had that discussion at C-suite level? What needs to come back and when? Excellent. Brilliant. So as we hoped and believe would be the case, most people on the call have already had the conversation. Now, if that then plays into how you set up your SGC or whatever it is that is promoting your minimum viable business, then that is exceptionally helpful. So how does that planning and knowing what that minimum viable business is play into how we set up SGC? And this is the final thing I'll say before I pass over to Chris to do the demonstration and the important stuff. We talked about the order that your business needs to be recovered. Well, what's important? What needs to come back first? And as an example, a possible recovery order might be domain controllers first and foremost, then your core applications, and that might be finance, warehouse, for example, mail and other communication tools, which could be in the cloud. Lastly, maybe documents and files. Now, the order might be different for everybody, and at least one person said that they wanted everything back almost instantly in the previous poll. So what does that mean for SGC? Well, you can start by creating your storage pools in a way that represent your priorities. It makes your storage array easy to see, manage, and understand. Critically, by grouping your minimum viable business files in one or two easily identifiable pools, you can get that going quickest. Your whole company might be 25 gig. Your domain controllers, critical databases may only be 5 gig of that. you can get those back first, have your forensics target those as a priority, and then turn your attention to how you tackle the rest. And then there are additional benefits to planning those pools. Policies are set at a pool level. Therefore, you can set your policies by data criticality and its change rates. Domain controllers by their nature don't change much and may only need to be copied every 24 hours to be sufficient. You might, however, want your primary databases copied every 2 to 4 hours, and your RPOs will dictate that. But you have flexibility with planning. Setting these policies logically also ensures that you can keep the noise down to your system to a minimum. SGC has a limited overhead, but it does nonetheless have an overhead. So keeping copies to an appropriate minimum while still protecting your business is a wise strategy. And lastly, size matters. Covenco can work with you on size and your arrays. But if we're to assume that, again, your budget dictates you cannot have 100% spare capacity, how are you going to clean and promote your data if you have one large data pool? The SGC copies can be promoted as thin copies, yes, but you want to clean the data, and you may want to promote that clean data as full copies. And how do you do that with limited space? Again, having smaller, targeted, minimum viable business files allows you to be space efficient when you recover and gives you time to consider options for the rest. Now, that could be DR kit from us, or will you be keeping those copies thin, but your options are available. Now, of course, Covenco can provide resources, guidance, and help to how you set up SGC and your test, but we'll have a conversation about that after the demonstration. Now, that's enough for me, and it seems a good time to pass to Chris to show you a simple SGC recovery. Now, it will highlight its base simplicity, and thank you for your kind attention to this point. But Chris, if I pass to you, I'm sure you'll show this more eloquently than I'll be able to say so.
Well, yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting one. Always nervous that the tech's going to work at the right time. So
the tech works. It's whether it's going to work in our environment.
Well, yeah, like children and animal on TV, they can sometimes be unpredictable the best of times. Guys, thank you for joining us. So what we're going to do is run through the protection, so setting up some policies on a flash system, but also presenting those to VMware for recovery of a virtual machine. So we'll log into our flash system. And we will hit the landing page. It's important to note that the safeguarded copy isolates backup copies from production data. Cyber attack, malicious actors, or ransomware are all covered by this. So while we're using VMware as the example, mostly because it's got a large market share, this strategy can also apply to things like IBM I or AIX, where people have the IBM I operating system generally doesn't have any viruses designed for it, but the people who have access to that data can modify it, delete it, make mistakes, or through malicious actions. And safeguarded copy can help you recover that data just as easily as it can through VMware environment. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just do a run through. So we've got our 5200 with a number of drives here. We've got a single pool of about 5 terabytes, of which about 42% is used. We've got a number of volumes that are presented as data stores to VMware environment. And if we just look at the VMware environment very quickly, we've got a single VCSA with 3 hosts and a nominal amount of virtual machines that we spun up for this test. Now, applying safeguarded copy, it's based on snapshots. People might be or might not be familiar with snapshots. They're point-in-time copies that we can roll back to. What we want to do here is create a snapshot policy. When we go to the policy tab, create snapshot policy, we'll give it something relevant to us. So Covenco SGC, we select our frequency. And again, going back to what Steve says, this comes into the plan. So what do you want to recover first? And what do you want your RPOs and RTOs to be? For this particular example, I'll select a frequency of an hour. And I'll keep the retention as 1 day. And I create that policy. Relatively simple. I think some of my concern here is demonstrating is that it looks so simple, but it's such a powerful tool. It's so useful in the event that there is an issue. So we've got step 1. We've created our policy. Our next step is to create a volume group. Volume group is nothing more than a logical container for us to organize our storage into and apply our policies to. So we can create a volume group here, give it, again, a name relevant to what we're trying to achieve. And we'll see that pop in just a second. So we've got no volumes in here. This is my Blue Peter one, which I will come back to in a minute. We can, from this volume group, we can create new volumes. So for this purpose, we'll just put a 50 gig volume in there. And then we apply our safeguarded backup policy based on our snapshot policy. So we click Flash Copy Map and we have the IBM Spectrum Copy Data Management, which is that software built into the array. We'll change avenues there. That's one of those moments. We'll assign the internal snapshot policy, the Covenco safeguarded copy. We'll make it safeguarded, and we'll choose a start time and date for it. This will set the start time and date for all of the future ones. So you might want to make it at 9 in the morning before everyone logs on, or at 2 in the morning when a ransomware attack is most likely to occur. So we'll go for 2 a.m. here. We'll assign that policy to the volume group. And we have protected all of the volumes in that volume group. So just setting it up, we've only got a single 50 gig LUN there. What we're going to go back to my Blue Peter one here. So this is our volume group 01. In here, you can see that I've got all of my data stores. I've applied my policy. My frequency is every hour. My retention is 2 days, and it kicks off at 2 p.m. And from here, I can see all my safeguarded copies. Now, this is the magic bit. If we go back to the amount of storage used, we've used about 42%. All of my volumes are in there. So you would expect that it was going to inflate the storage to 84%, but not the case. We've got a snapshot here from 12 p.m. We can create a thin clone from this particular snapshot. So I'm going to do that now. I get my safeguarded copy, I right click, I create thin clone. I put it into a restore volume group. Again, the volume groups are just logical containers that you apply policies to, nothing fancy. We select the pool that's going to be targeted to, and we create that volume group.
Now, while it's doing that, Chris, I know that you're obviously still running the demo, but you had that set up in, I think, less than 5 minutes, and you were telling everybody you were doing. So it's 2 to 3 minutes to get set up. Yep, and you've casually selected a clone that's say an hour or so ago. If this was a real DR scenario and you've been hit, you might be saying, I want to go back 4 hours, 6 hours. I want to look at these clones and see which one is useful to me. But you've selected that so casually. It's literally a case of clicking the clone.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So actually, Steve made a very good point. I've been running this for a number of days here. We have got a huge amount of restore points to go from. If you think of these as restore points, we can't modify that snapshot, but what we can do is select it to restore our safeguarded copy from. So that was a very good point. Thank you, Steve. So for the purposes of this presentation, then we've only gone back a couple of hours. We've had someone in the environment, they've made a modification, or they've deleted a server, or they've deleted a file, malicious or otherwise. And we put that into our restore volume group. We can see that the count here is 7. So if we look at the volumes, they've all got a suffix of 0. So that's just a way of identifying them away from the original volumes. We can see that the capacity is all thin. And if we look at our total space utilization, it's creeped up 1%. So in effect, we've got whole restore availability using minimum amount of space. So here's where the cool stuff comes into. So I can select any one of these thin clones from my safeguarded copy, and I can map that to my hosts. So I'm going to map that to my 3 ESX hosts, DSO2, You're going to love the need some Muzak for the interim screens, and hopefully the rescans, because there's such a small environment, are going to be relatively quick. So we're now in our VMware environment. We're going to be looking at our storage, and we're going to do the usual rescan to pick up that new storage. We'll scan for both Newlands and VMFS data stores. That's completed across my 3 hosts. I'm going to go through the actions of adding a new data store, but we're not going to be adding a new data store. We're going to be reassigning a disk signature. So we know it's a VMFS. We select our host. And this is where it should be relatively quick. Those rescans always take a little while. I mean, I wish I had a poll for how long it takes on larger environments, and this is only 3 nodes.
This is where we talk amongst ourselves for a second or two.
Yeah. Well,
And
during
the best repeater happens, yeah.
During that segue, it's come back. So what we're going to do is just this may be a little technically complex, but this is a simple procedure. Once we can document it through to you and go through it, 2 or 3 times, what we're doing is we're just identifying the snapshot we made as independent from our original data store. So they've all got unique IDs here. I understand that is the snapshot restore, so I'm going to select that. And this is a really important part. So the snapshot is got the exact same disk signature as the original data store. We're going to assign a new one to it. We're going to go through and finish. And what VMware will do is resolve that with a suffix on the data store. And it will appear in my list at any moment. There we go. So we've got a snapshot restore. It's given it that name, but we can rename it to anything. So we could just rename that to SGC restore Covlab DSO2. We can get if we take our lab SQL Server here. Now I've got an opportunity here. There are two ways of doing things. Now I can move that VM to another storage array for forensic analysis. I can spin it up from our thin clone with minimal amount of impact to the storage, or I can move it back into our live environment. But it really is dependent on the plan that you've got in place. So if we take our VMX file and we register this VM, I'm going to call it Lab SQL 01 recovered. Click next. Go through all the stuff about registering a virtual machine, which you may or may not be familiar with. Very much next, finish. We'll move back to our virtual machines tab. And here we can see that we have our recovered VM from that snapshot time. So just to prove its efficacy, I'm going to remove the network from it, as I would do if I was recovering for a live customer environment. And then I'm going to power this on.
Now, while that's powering on, Chris, and these things do take time,
They do.
You've run through this incredibly quickly, and you're very experienced. But it's easy to see with the tools available how quickly a customer might be able to pick up a snapshot from 2 hours ago, promote that up to a different server as a thin copy, do some checks to see if the data is in any way corrupted. And if it is a viable copy, this is the point you're going to bring your forensics teams in and start making decisions around whether to clean that data, and then where are you going to put that data? Are you going to put that VM back into your estate? Are you going to build a green environment, etc.? There are a lot of decisions to make at this point, but in less than 15 minutes, and whilst talking us through it, you have set up a snapshot policy, taken snapshots, and promoted a snapshot back to a point where a customer might start to do some level of cleaning the data.
Yeah, and this is SGC's to complement existing strategies. So we noted in the poll that people had got immutable backup strategies. I think an immutable production storage strategy is really important to the overall strategy of protecting your infrastructure from ransomware or any threat actor, whether that's a disgruntled employee, and the speed at which it can be done. I mean, I kind of haggled with Steve about the name of the meeting should be SGC, blink and you'll miss it, because it's so quick and so efficient it really is just a super tool. So I would apologise if it was too quick for anyone, and I would welcome if anyone wants to talk about it at the end of the session or engage with us in the future. We'd love to get on site. We've got a lab set up, so happy to walk you through it again. So here we have our server booted up. We log into it. It'll say obviously it was crash consistent, I suppose you'd call it, but it wasn't expected to be recovered. It's running off of our snapshot here. Right. We're utilizing, again, 1% of the overall space, but we've got the ability to bring back a huge amount, with the caveats that we need to keep a look on storage controller performance, but also capacity. It's an amazing tool to complement your existing strategies. And if you've got an IBM storage array less than 3 years old, there's a chance that you can switch it on and start protecting your data now. And so that includes the...
I think you've been cruelly robbed of your screen for the last couple of steps there, Chris, but we'd seen you booted the server. And the server was coming back online. And I guess the important thing here is for anybody that's not used SGC in anger, the ability to promote those copies up as quickly as you have. And as I say, I know you are someone who's done this hundreds of times, but you can see how any customer could get used to that process and could bring those copies back online quickly. And one of the key things we mentioned earlier on is because this is production storage, it's immediately available to your servers, to your systems. That's not to say it's the best place to leave it. That's not to say that you don't have to have a green room to move it to, but you can quickly promote that back. And even though other companies and other systems will have in place similar policies, I don't think I've seen anything as slick and as quick as SGC from that perspective.
I agree with you.
And it backs up something differently. So I just wanted to make a point that perhaps hadn't been made earlier. When you talk about having a cyber strategy, there are a number of different facets to any DR policy. Of course, it's important to be able to have continuity in the event of a system failure, storage failure, your site burning down, all traditional DR scenarios. But a lot of the cyber threats we're seeing now, if you have a site-to-site replication that would have protected you immediately and you could come up instantly, let's say it was Hyperswap because we're all IBM on this call, and you could instantly recover in a DR scenario, that's fantastic if it's a fire or a flood. But any bad actor getting in a Hyperswap scenario to start to destroy your data, it's going to be destroyed immediately on the second site because anything that's replicated is a monkey see, monkey do type of approach. So you start destroying data on one side, it will destroy data on another. And that's where SGC has its part to play in giving you that final barrier against the threat actor. Now, thank you for that, Chris. That was excellent and far better than my verbose start to this. So we've talked a lot about the possibility of using SGC in its rawest state, but it doesn't need to stop there. And our colleague Greg is on the call. Greg, it's all your technology. This is IBM technology, so we're espousing its virtues, but this is your team and the people back at Hursley that have worked on this. It doesn't have to be as manual as that. There are ways you can orchestrate things using Predator, Defender, and other tools. So if you don't mind, could you talk us through how you can augment the base SGC system?
Absolutely, yeah. Great demo, Chris. Great introduction, Steve, as well. This is all superb in terms of setting the scene for where Safeguarded Copy can provide you with that extra level of recovery point at speed for your business and for that minimum viable business. And just a little bit of a preamble. So a couple of things around Safeguarded Copy is that a lot of the development work that we carry out within IBM and within our Hursley labs, a lot of it comes down from our mainframe clients who demand some of these features in banking, for example. A lot of our banking customers come to us with these requirements, and we develop those on our mainframe storage. enterprise level storage systems, and those capabilities then filter down to the almost the entry level products that can be provided across every market and every size of customer. So what you're getting here is a tremendous amount of value to the capabilities within the storage systems, with real heritage. The code base that this comes from, that runs on all of our flash systems, had its 20th birthday last year. So that's 20 years in development for the overall code base. So this isn't, we're not new to this landscape, to this environment. We've been doing storage for an awful long time, and Storage Virtualize has been around for over 20 years now. And these features and functions, as I say, come from that enterprise heritage. And another area that I just wanted to touch on as well, which is a really good point, is around the threats and how the attack vectors work. Is quite often that when your systems are infiltrated, an attack vector might be to go and attack the backups first and render them useless before then attacking the production workload. So a client, unless they are carrying out very regular full recoveries from their backups, having immutable copies in your backups is great, and it's fantastic to do. But unless you're carrying out very, very regular recovery checks of those, how do you know how reliable those immutable copies or those backup copies are? And it's not an easy thing to do in some circumstances, because a lot of the solutions that are developed have come from historical backup type solutions. So coming at it from a safeguarded copy perspective, it brings a whole new angle to these current threats. And what we've got within IBM is safeguarded copy as a fundamental. Take safeguarded copies. If nothing else, at least you have a recovery point. And we also then, as you'd probably imagine, have a wider solution stack to provide orchestration and data protection across an entire business. So these steps to data resilience, really kind of the step one is, as Steve said, have your security, have your data security on your networks and through your various kind of endpoint protections. Absolutely have that, as well as your DR, because this doesn't replace those. What it does is augment the capabilities. So step two, have the immutable copies. When you've got this capability within your environment, take the copies, and if nothing else, you've got that point to recover from. The discovery piece is really around, how quickly can you discover where you've got an infection potentially within your environment, you've got some ransomware there. And that's where we partner with the likes of Predator that provide the capabilities to scan not just your safeguarded copies that are mounted into your green room or your clean room, but also to scan your backups. So you've got multiple levels there of checking and being able to discover where you've got any ransomware or any infiltration within your data, but really ultimately where you've got a good solid recovery point, because that's the really important thing. And being able to be comfortable that you've got that recovery point and you know where it is. Being able to recover from that and the orchestration of that in terms of safeguarded copy, being able to manage that through a process. We have not just those safeguarded minimum viable business recovery points, but also the full business recovery. And we have a wider ranging solution called Storage Defender, which manages and orchestrates all of that as well. And ultimately, the last step on the ladder really is around automation, being able to automate all of these processes that make sense to automate in terms of taking those copies and taking them regularly, being able to expire them is all part of that management process that happens on the flash system. But how do you do that across multiple systems, across multiple workloads? And when it comes down to a recovery point, the last thing you want to do is have too many manual intervention stages when you need to recover quickly. So the automation at that point is really, really the key point in being slick and being able to recover in that kind of that time scale that suits the recovery time objectives of the business. And on the next slide, what we've done is we've broken that down just in a few more, in a little bit more of a view around that minimum viable business and the full company recovery. So being able to look at things such as the regulatory requirements. Financial services have a lot of new regulations coming in early next year where they have to prove that they can recover. And so being able to understand what your minimum viable company is against a full company recovery will help them meet those regulations. Being able to mitigate the risk is essentially for them in that example across their whole business, and being able to manage that risk and mitigate the risk as much as possible. It also comes down to cost, something which Chris was talking about. If you have a very large estate, taking full safeguarded copies of everything could be an overkill. It could be really expensive. So really understanding what are the crown jewels for your business, and what do we need to protect and be able to have the recovery point from safeguarded copies. That's the minimum viable company. And having the forensic analysis, the ability to do that, if you have a green room, clean room type environment, being able to recover copies not just at that point where you absolutely have to because you know you've got an infection, but be able to recover them and do that scanning and do that checking as part of your daily processes. Again, the automation all kind of comes into that. So that's really kind of where the solutions themselves really complement probably what you're already doing as a business, but being able to recover in that super quick time frame, being able to discover any infiltrations and any risks as quickly as possible. Some of the stuff we haven't covered today, but we can absolutely speak to you about, is real-time anomaly detection, which we can do on the modules within our flash systems. So we're monitoring every I/O that comes into the box, looking to see if there's any indicators of potentially something nefarious happening. If there is, that could trigger a flash copy, a safeguarded copy immediately to give you a recovery point, which means you limit the amount of time. You can then ring fence that environment and limit the amount of infiltration that has across your environment, which again really kind of limits the impact it has to your business, because then you have essentially less data to recover and systems to recover, which means your recovery time overall is improved. So there's many facets that we can build into this. And that is something that the team at Covenco absolutely can help you with, and with our help as well. So don't be thinking that this is something that's unachievable. It's absolutely steps that we can take overall as a holistic view of your business and how we can secure that for you. The essential part is, as we've kind of said, and as I'll say again, have IBM FlashSystem Storage and take those safeguarded copies. Essential to any recovery.
That's excellent. So thank you for that. I mean, working with Predator as we have in the past, one of the things that I noticed is that one of the benefits to using the Predator system, to looking at the Predator system, is that it encourages you to already build some of those building blocks. It is in itself a clean room, so you have that place to promote to. The fact that you're having those backups checked regularly means that you have the sense of safety, of purpose, that there are good backups that can be recovered. And then, as you say, if you add in the flash copy, the FCM4s, the latest FCM4s, and their entropy detection, you're starting to see these things earlier. And again, IBM, we should stop giving these things away for free. It's just my personal opinion. But the FCM4s, that entropy is part of the built-in technology in the system. Every single flash core module 4 checks every I/O for entropy, which is how random the I/O is. And as it sees the randomness go up, it senses or alerts you to the possibility that could be something you need to take action on. And as you say, it can be orchestrated if you have the right layers. So I really appreciate that, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
So pretty much that's everything we wanted to talk about today. I realised that we've rattled through an awful lot in 45 minutes, and I appreciate your time. But now's a good time for a Q&A. So if there are any questions, we can open up the mics. Or David, is it better to do this through the chat system if anything has been put into the chat system at this point?
Yeah, there is a chat system on this GoToWebinar. I've posted, I've said on there, please feel free to pose any questions here, and the panelists are ready for your points, observations, and questions. We've not had any questions yet. We've still got quite a few people on the call, so I'm anticipating someone must have a question for us, but nothing yet so far.
or it could just be that Chris has done things so incredibly well and so incredibly
all of us have. I was on an IBM call.
Okay.
I was on
Well,
an IBM
we'll talk amongst ourselves for 30 seconds in case there's any questions to come.
I was on a tech call with IBM, and there must have been about 40 people on the call. And I can't remember. It's the user group at Hersley, Greg, if the lady will be there. But she'd just gone through it so well, there were no questions. It felt awful. She's like, come on, give me some questions. Give me some questions. So we'll take it.
Point, by the way. Speaking of user groups at Hersley, sorry for cutting across you there, Chris. Greg, you are running the user group at Hersley on the 4th and 5th, I believe, next month.
That's right. Yeah, a fantastic event for anybody to come. And so this event is run by the developers down in Hersley at our site there, just south of Winchester. A couple of days of full immersion into all the goodness of Flash Systems, all the goodness of Defender. It's a customer partner event. Fantastic location to come to, and so much to learn as well. So if anybody'd like to come along to that, get in touch with Steve and we can get you registered.
Yeah, that'd be great to have you guys along.
Yeah, and we'll just fly a little flag for Great Britain there, because everything we've talked about, the SGC, the code that was built on the V7000, all of that originally designed in our very own Hersley lab, so IBM's Hersley lab. So fantastic for the Brits in putting forward this type of technologies. So let's finish up then. Some key takeaways. I started by saying SGC was too good to be free, and I genuinely believe that to be the case. Used correctly, it could be a crucial part of your cyber defenses, either on its own or part of a more orchestrated solution, as Greg demonstrated. I hope we highlighted the importance of planning, and I'm glad to see from a lot of the responses we had on the polls that people have identified that minimum viable business. But if we plan with our storage arrays and help ourselves identify that quicker, then it can only help the recovery process. And the time to act is now. Those threats are growing, 3.4 billion phishing emails a day. I'll give you a personal insight into how these things work. I was doing a demonstration, a conversation to our own internal staff about the importance of keeping everything secret. And I happened to know that one of the young ladies had a cat, and her cat was called Mr. Jiggles. And I joked with her. I said, for example, if I know your password is Mr. Jiggles 3, Mr. Jiggles 1, and she looked at me and went, oh my God, it is, isn't it? And that's the point. You know, these people, these are the soft underbelly. Your staff, unfortunately, if they haven't got strong passwords, haven't got two-factor authentication, that 3.4 billion phishing emails is going out there every single day, and unfortunately, they will get through eventually. So SGC might well be that final last point of defense. And it goes without saying that Covenco are here to help wherever we can. So if you wish to reach out to your Covenco representative, Chris, then we can either bring Greg into the conversation, or, as you can see, a lot of this we will do ourselves. So it only remains for me to thank you all for your time, for you giving up your lunch hour, and I hope you found it informative. To Greg, to Chris, and to my colleague David, who chirped in a second ago, for all their efforts in arranging this. And feel free to contact us for more information, to request a POC, a demo, a proposal, whatever it may be. But thank you very much for your lunchtime, and thank you to everybody involved. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, David.
Guys.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.